The black stripper stepped in front of the knife. Now the Mafia boss is losing his mind. The room erupted in chaos. Zara Mitchell, tall, with copper-toned skin and sharp brown eyes, stumbled as her tray hit the floor. Glass and ice scattered across the polished hardwood. Dominic Calabrese froze in the VIP section, a tailored charcoal suit clinging to his broad frame, dark Italian features rigid with shock. A young man moved fast, a 7-inch tactical knife aimed at Dominic. Zara lunged without hesitation. The blade struck her side instead. White fabric darkened instantly as she crumpled toward the ground. Dominic's hands reached out, catching her just before she hit the floor. Blood seeped between his fingers. The most feared Mafia boss in Chicago, a man who had ordered countless deaths without hesitation, now shouted for help, raw panic breaking through his composed exterior. The woman who had risked her life for him was fading in his arms. How did a dancer from Bronzeville end up in this position? And how far will a man like Dominic go when the only thing he fears losing is a woman he was never meant to love? If you're watching, tell us where you are in the comments. Subscribe now to hear the full story. A special shout out to all our viewers, both new and returning, from the United States, Canada, Netherlands, South Africa, Australia, the United Kingdom, and every corner of the world. Thank you for being here and supporting these stories. You're the reason we keep creating them. Let's begin. Zara Mitchell learned early that survival required discipline. She grew up in Bronzeville, in a narrow apartment on Martin Luther King Drive, where the walls carried the sound of passing buses and late-night arguments from neighbors who were tired, broke, or both. Her mother vanished into addiction when Zara was 7, leaving behind unanswered questions and a silence that never fully closed. Her father existed only as a name typed on a birth certificate. No stories. No visits. No apologies. Her grandmother, Lillian Mitchell, filled the space left behind. Lillian had arrived in Chicago decades earlier during the tail end of the Great Migration. She had worked as a seamstress for most of her life, sewing gowns for wealthy women who never asked her name. From that work, she learned precision and restraint, lessons she passed to her granddaughter with care. She taught Zara how to stand straight even when the world tried to bend her. She taught her how to tell the difference between attention and respect. Most of all, she taught her that dignity was not something anyone could give or take. It was something you guarded. Zara was a serious child, observant and quick to adapt. She did well in school, not because learning came easily, but because she understood what failure would cost. By the time she graduated high school, college felt less like a dream and more like an obligation. She enrolled at Malcolm X College, commuting across the city while working part-time jobs that drained her energy but kept the lights on. Nursing appealed to her because it made sense. It was practical. It mattered. She wanted to help people who had no safety net, people like the ones she grew up around. She earned her degree at 24 and carried the pride of that achievement alongside a crushing weight of student loan debt. Entry-level hospital positions paid little more than survival wages, and each month felt like a careful calculation. Rent, utilities, transportation, food. There was no room for error. No margin for emergencies. The emergency arrived quietly. Lillian's diabetes worsened. A missed appointment turned into complications. Complications turned into kidney failure. Dialysis became routine, and routine became expensive. Insurance covered part of it, but not enough. Bills stacked on the kitchen table in envelopes Zara learned to dread. She picked up extra shifts where she could, but exhaustion only stretched so far. It was a friend from college who mentioned the club. They were sitting in a coffee shop near the Pink Line, textbooks spread between them. The friend spoke casually, almost carelessly, about a place in River North where dancers made in one night what Zara earned in weeks. Zara laughed it off at first. She had never seen herself that way. She had spent her life building something stable, something respectable. That night, she lay awake listening to her grandmother breathe through sleep. The sound was uneven, labored. Zara stared at the ceiling and thought about numbers. She thought about interest rates, medical costs, and time slipping away. Pride did not pay bills. Ideals did not stop organs from failing. In February 2019, Zara walked through the back entrance of the Obsidian Room. The club sat on Hubbard Street, housed in a renovated warehouse that gave nothing away from the outside. Inside, it was controlled elegance. Dark wood, soft lighting, leather seating arranged to encourage privacy. The clientele was selective. Politicians, executives, athletes, men who arrived in tailored suits and left without names attached to their transactions. The rules were clear. Discretion mattered more than anything. Zara adapted quickly. She wore the dresses they gave her, learned the layout, memorized faces. She kept conversations neutral and her posture composed. She did not flirt the way others did. She listened. Management noticed. She was assigned more floor service than stage time, a position that brought her into closer contact with the club's most important guests. She did not know at first who truly owned the place. Dominic Calabrese did not announce himself. He never had to. His name moved ahead of him through Chicago's underworld, carried in cautious tones. At 34, he ran what remained of one of the city's most powerful Italian-American crime families. His father had died in federal custody years earlier, officially from a heart attack. Dominic inherited the organization in the aftermath, stepping into leadership with a calm that unsettled even seasoned associates. He had prepared for power in ways his father never did. Dominic graduated from Northwestern, trained in finance and strategy, and approached crime with the mindset of a corporate executive. He favored planning over impulse, numbers over emotion, risk assessed rather than embraced. Violence was a tool, not a release. Physically, Dominic matched the reputation. Tall, broad-shouldered, dark hair kept precise. His suits were custom-made, understated in color but exact in fit. His expression rarely shifted, and when it did, it was measured. People around him learned to read small changes in posture or tone, because those changes often carried consequences. Fear followed him, even in rooms where no one spoke his name. Dominic did not often visit the Obsidian Room. The club functioned smoothly without his presence, managed by men who understood what failure would cost. When he did appear, it was usually late, after meetings that left him mentally exhausted. He used the VIP section as a place to think, not to indulge. The Obsidian Room served as a crossroads. Money met influence. Desire met secrecy. It was where deals were implied rather than stated outright. For Dominic, it was a controlled environment, a place he owned without needing to touch. Zara became part of that environment without realizing it. By her third week, she had learned the unspoken hierarchy. Which tables demanded silence? Which expected conversation? Which eyes to avoid and which to meet directly? She had not yet learned Dominic Calabrese's face, but she had learned the way the room changed when he arrived. Staff moved faster. Voices lowered. The floor manager straightened his jacket and checked the VIP area with visible tension. Zara noticed these things. She always did. When she was sent to deliver a bottle of whiskey to the VIP section one March evening, she felt the shift immediately. The man seated there did not look up at first. He studied his glass as if calculating something only he could see. Zara approached without hesitation, placed the bottle down carefully, and spoke only when necessary. It was enough to draw his attention. Dominic saw someone who did not belong to the performance. Zara did not lower her eyes. She did not smile on command. She stood with the posture of someone used to responsibility rather than attention. That difference registered. Their exchange was brief, professional, but it left an impression neither of them acknowledged aloud. Zara was escorted away quickly, the floor manager apologizing under his breath. Dominic remained seated, his drink untouched. Two lives continued on separate paths that night. Zara returned to her apartment in Pilsen, counting her earnings and transferring most of it toward medical bills. Dominic returned to meetings that stretched past midnight, managing conflicts that required careful pressure rather than force. They did not yet understand that the space between those worlds was narrowing. March 15, 2019, began badly for Dominic Calabrese and showed no sign of improving. By noon, he was standing inside a secured office overlooking Lake Michigan, listening as one of his senior men explained how a shipment had been intercepted at the port of Indiana. Federal agents had moved faster than expected. Containers were seized. 3 men were in custody. The financial loss alone exceeded $2 million, but money was not the real concern. Exposure was. As if that were not enough, word arrived before dusk that the Detroit organization had begun pressing harder into Chicago territory. Messages were being sent through intermediaries, each one clearer than the last. They wanted control of key distribution routes on the west side. They expected Dominic to yield. He had no intention of doing so. By early evening, Dominic dismissed his lieutenants and poured himself a drink he barely tasted. He needed distance from the noise of decisions and consequences. Not home. Not another meeting. He wanted a place that belonged to him but demanded nothing in return. He chose the Obsidian Room. When Dominic arrived just after 10, the staff reacted instantly. His usual VIP section was prepared without a word being spoken aloud. Curtains drawn. Security alert. Enzo positioned at the entrance. Dominic settled into the leather seating, loosened his cufflinks, and stared into a glass of Macallan. He was not there for entertainment. He was there to think. Across the club, Zara Mitchell was nearing the end of her shift rotation. It was her 3rd week working the floor, and she still checked the seating chart before every assignment, making sure she followed protocol. When the floor manager motioned her over and told her to bring a fresh bottle to the VIP section, she felt the familiar tension that came with that area of the club. "Say nothing unless spoken to," the manager murmured. "Drop it and leave." Zara nodded and picked up the bottle, steadying it on her tray. She walked toward the elevated section without hesitation, even though she could feel eyes tracking her movement. The men seated there carried themselves differently. Quieter. Heavier. Dominic did not look up as she approached. He was mid-thought, replaying conversations, recalculating risks. Zara placed the bottle carefully on the table. "Your whiskey," she said. Dominic's eyes lifted then, drawn not by her voice but by the absence of effect in it. She was calm. Direct. Not performing. He studied her face for a moment longer than necessary. "You're new," he said. It was not phrased as a question. 3 weeks, Zara replied. Most women in that position would have added something else. A smile. A compliment. She did not. And before this? Zara met his gaze evenly. That's not really what clients come here to talk about. For the first time that day, something close to amusement touched Dominic's expression. "You'd be surprised what I come here to talk about." The exchange lasted less than 2 minutes. The floor manager appeared almost immediately, his voice tight with concern as he apologized and guided Zara away. She did not look back. Dominic did not stop watching until the curtain closed. The rest of the night passed without incident. Dominic left before midnight, his mind occupied by logistics and threats. Yet the image of Zara's steady gaze followed him longer than he expected. Not because she was beautiful, though she was. Because she had not flinched. Over the next few weeks, Dominic returned to the Obsidian Room more often than usual. He justified it easily. Visibility mattered. Appearances sent messages. No one questioned his presence. Zara noticed the pattern before she understood it. She became aware of the way her assignments shifted when Dominic arrived. She was asked to serve the VIP section more frequently, though nothing explicit was said. Each interaction remained restrained. He never touched her. Never asked her to sit. He asked questions instead. Where was she from? How long had she lived in the city? What did she do when she wasn't working? Zara answered selectively, offering facts without emotion. She told him about Bronzeville. about commuting, about nursing school, though she did not elaborate on debt or fear. Dominic listened closely, filing details away. What he did not learn through conversation, he learned elsewhere. Dominic had people who gathered information without being noticed. He learned that Zara lived in a modest apartment in Pilsen, that most of her income went toward medical bills, that her grandmother attended dialysis 3 times a week, that Zara volunteered at a free clinic in Humboldt Park on her days off. This knowledge unsettled him, not because it surprised him, but because it mattered. Dominic began timing his visits to coincide with Zara's shifts. He told himself it was coincidence. No one challenged him. Over time, their conversations lengthened. They spoke about books, about Chicago politics, about the city's changing neighborhoods. Zara discovered that Dominic was well-read, precise in his opinions, and unexpectedly thoughtful. She also noticed what he avoided. He never spoke about his family. He never discussed work unless pressed. There was an emotional boundary he did not cross. Whispers began among the dancers. They noticed that Zara was not treated like the others when Dominic was present. Managers were polite. Security stayed close. Some assumed she was being kept. Others assumed worse. Zara ignored them. She focused on the person in front of her, not the rumors surrounding him. Eventually, curiosity overcame caution. One evening, after Dominic had asked her opinion on a novel she mentioned weeks earlier, Zara set her glass down and looked at him directly. "Everyone here seems afraid of you," she said. "I want to know why." Dominic did not answer immediately. Enzo shifted slightly at the edge of the section, alert. Dominic raised a hand, dismissing him. "You're asking a dangerous question," Dominic said. "I'm asking an honest one." Silence stretched between them. Dominic studied her face, searching for calculation. He found none. "I run a criminal organization," he said. "I make money from activities that hurt people. I have ordered men killed. That's the truth." Zara did not react the way he expected. No gasp. No retreat. "Why tell me?" she asked. "Because you asked," Dominic replied. "And because lying to you feels wrong." That admission changed the nature of their connection. There were no illusions after that. Zara did not excuse his actions, but she did not walk away. She asked questions he answered carefully. He did not justify himself. He explained. Trust formed not through comfort, but through clarity. They never labeled what was happening. There were no promises. No declarations. Just time spent together in a space that felt separate from the rest of their lives. For Dominic, it was the first place where power did not define him. For Zara, it was the first time she felt fully seen without being claimed. Neither of them acknowledged the risk. They were careful. They kept distance. Yet each conversation drew them closer to something neither was prepared to name. By the time autumn arrived, the bond between them had become impossible to ignore. They did not know how quickly it would be tested. The conflict with the Marchetti family did not begin with shouting or public threats. It began with pressure. Quiet moves. Routes disrupted. Couriers disappearing. The Detroit organization had been expanding for years, moving steadily across state lines with patience and intent. Chicago's West Side was the prize they wanted most, a network Dominic Calabrese had spent years tightening and protecting. The first warning came when one of Dominic's trusted men failed to check in after a routine delivery. His body was found 2 days later in an abandoned garage near Cicero Avenue. The message was clear. Territory was being challenged. A week later, another Calabrese associate was shot while leaving a warehouse meeting. He survived long enough to identify the shooters as outsiders. Dominic responded with restraint. He sent intermediaries. He requested sit-downs. He made it known that Chicago was not open for negotiation. The replies were dismissive. The Marchetti family believed Dominic was too cautious, too focused on control to act decisively. They mistook patience for weakness. The situation escalated when one of Dominic's restaurants in Little Italy was set on fire in the early hours of a Tuesday morning. The building survived. The message did not. Dominic stood across the street as firefighters worked, his face unreadable, his mind calculating cost and response. Negotiations followed within days and collapsed just as quickly. The Detroit side wanted dominance, not compromise. By November, violence had become a constant threat. Dominic increased security, limited his movements, and tightened communication. He trusted only a handful of men. Among them were 3 lieutenants who had been with him since the early days of his leadership. They understood his methods and his limits. On a Thursday evening that felt more like late summer than fall, Dominic chose to visit the Obsidian Room. The air outside was mild, the city restless. Inside the club, the crowd was thick. Men laughed too loudly. Glasses clinked. Music pulsed through the space. To most, it was another indulgent night. Dominic sat in the VIP section with his 3 lieutenants, voices low, bodies angled inward. They discussed routes, names, timelines. Each man understood the stakes. The Detroit organization was pushing harder, testing boundaries, waiting for a misstep. "We can't let this drag," one of them said quietly. "They think you won't move." "They think wrong," Dominic replied. His tone was calm, measured. "We move when it matters." Across the room, Zara Mitchell moved between tables with practiced ease. She carried drinks, checked on guests, kept her posture composed. She felt the tension near the VIP section, a subtle heaviness she had learned to recognize. Dominic's presence always changed the room. Tonight, it felt tighter. She noticed the lieutenants first. Their expressions were focused, conversations clipped. She kept her distance, doing her job without drawing attention. There was no reason to believe anything was wrong. Not yet. The man who entered through the back door was young. Barely 25. He wore dark clothing and moved with purpose. Security at the rear entrance had been paid to look away for a moment, a favor that would cost them their lives later. The assassin's focus was singular. He did not scan the room. He did not hesitate. His eyes locked onto the VIP section. He carried no firearm. The knife he held was compact, sharp, chosen for efficiency. Guns drew attention. This required precision. He moved through the crowd without urgency, blending in until he reached the short staircase leading up to Dominic's section. At the same time, Enzo, Dominic's bodyguard, was pulled a few steps away by a disturbance near the bar. It was brief. It was enough. Zara saw the man's face before she saw the weapon. There was nothing expressive in his eyes. No anger. No excitement. Just resolve. She recognized that look from her childhood, from streets where decisions were made quickly and consequences followed without delay. Her body reacted before her mind could intervene. The knife appeared in the man's hand as he stepped onto the first stair. Dominic was mid-sentence, turned slightly toward one of his lieutenants. He did not see the threat. Zara dropped her tray. Glass shattered. Ice scattered across the floor. She ran. The distance closed in seconds. The assassin raised his arm. Zara reached Dominic at the same moment the blade came down. She pushed into him, her shoulder colliding with his chest. The knife struck her side instead, sinking deep. Pain arrived after impact. A blunt force that stole her breath. Her legs gave way. The world tilted as she fell. Dominic caught her. For a moment, he did not understand what had happened. He felt her weight, saw the blood spreading across her blouse, felt warmth soaking into his hands. His mind struggled to process the scene in front of him. The room erupted. Screams cut through the music. Chairs scraped. People surged away from the VIP section. Enzo turned, saw the attacker, and crossed the distance in a single charge. The assassin did not resist. His neck snapped under Enzo's grip. His body hit the floor and did not move again. None of it registered with Dominic. Zara's eyes fluttered, unfocused. Her breath came shallow, uneven. Blood pooled between Dominic's fingers as he pressed his hands against her wound, trying to stop what he could not control. "Stay with me," he said, his voice breaking. "Stay awake." He had ordered men killed without hesitation. He had watched rivals die without blinking. This was different. This was terror without distance. Paramedics arrived within minutes, forcing Dominic to release her. He resisted at first, then stepped back, his suit stained dark. He watched as they lifted her onto a stretcher, tubes and hands moving quickly. Her eyes met his once more before closing. At Northwestern Memorial Hospital, surgeons worked for 11 hours. The knife had punctured her liver and damaged a major vein. She lost blood at a rate that pushed her body to its limit. 3 times, her heart faltered. 3 times they brought her back. Dominic did not leave the hospital. He stood in hallways that smelled of antiseptic and waited through hours that felt endless. Nurses whispered as they passed. Security watched him closely. His lieutenants arrived with updates he barely heard. He issued instructions without emotion. "Find everyone involved," he said. "All of them." The conflict that followed spread across the city with speed. Retaliation met resistance. Names were crossed off lists. Dominic remained at Zara's bedside whenever he was allowed, holding her hand, watching monitors, refusing rest. When the doctors finally emerged with cautious optimism, Dominic collapsed against the wall. Enzo caught him before he fell. The sight shocked everyone present. The man who controlled entire neighborhoods with a word was shaking, undone. Love arrived not as comfort, but as realization. Dominic understood, fully and without denial, that Zara Mitchell had become the center of his world. Her decision to protect him had stripped away every defense he had built. As she lay unconscious, he made a promise he did not speak aloud. Whatever survived of his life after this moment would be shaped by her survival. The city outside continued its restless motion. Inside the hospital, time narrowed to the steady rhythm of a heart monitor and the quiet certainty that nothing would ever be the same again. The man who attacked Dominic Calabrese never had time to understand what he had failed to accomplish. Enzo reached him before the screams fully took shape. One clean movement. No hesitation. No second strike. The body collapsed near the base of the VIP steps, lifeless, ignored as panic spread through the club. For Enzo, the action required no thought. Protect the boss. End the threat. That was all. Paramedics forced their way through the crowd minutes later. They found Zara barely conscious, her pulse rapid and unstable. Blood loss was severe. The knife had torn through her liver and clipped the inferior vena cava, a wound that turned minutes into a fight against inevitability. Oxygen was applied. Pressure was constant. Orders were shouted. Dominic watched every motion, every expression, reading fear in places professionals tried to hide. At Northwestern Memorial Hospital, the trauma team moved with controlled urgency. Zara was taken straight into surgery. Dominic was stopped at the doors, his bloodied hands stripped from her body. The doors closed. The clock began. The first hours passed in fragments. Surgeons worked to control bleeding, repair vascular damage, stabilize organs pushed to failure. Her blood pressure collapsed twice. Her heart stuttered. Each time, intervention pulled her back. The third collapse nearly ended the effort. A senior surgeon took over, hands steady, voice firm. 11 hours after she was wheeled in, the procedure ended. Zara had survived the table, but survival was no promise. The damage was extensive. Infection was a real threat. The doctors spoke carefully, choosing words that carried no guarantees. Dominic did not hear reassurance. He heard conditions. He remained at the hospital from the moment she arrived. 72 hours passed without him leaving the floor. He refused food when it was offered. Water was taken only when Enzo placed it in his hand and waited until it was gone. Sleep never came. He sat upright in the chair beside her bed, eyes fixed on the monitors, tracking every rise and fall of her chest. Nurses whispered when they thought he could not hear. Security guards watched him with unease. His presence filled the space, not with threat, but with intensity that unsettled even those accustomed to crisis. He spoke rarely. When he did, his voice was low, controlled, stripped of warmth. His lieutenants came in shifts, bringing updates from the streets. Dominic listened without visible reaction. Orders were given in short sentences, precise and merciless. Routes closed. Assets seized. Names were approved for removal. The conflict with the Marchetti family escalated quickly, but Dominic remained distant from it in every way that mattered. His world had narrowed to a single hospital room. On the third morning, doctors emerged with guarded optimism. Zara's vitals had stabilized. The bleeding had stopped. She remained unconscious, but her body was no longer failing. It was the first moment that allowed hope to exist without qualification. Dominic stood as the words reached him. His legs gave out before he realized he was moving. He collapsed against the wall, breath breaking, hands shaking uncontrollably. Enzo caught him, stunned. He had seen Dominic injured, threatened, furious. He had never seen him break. Tears came without restraint. Dominic covered his face, shoulders shaking as emotion tore through defenses he had built over a lifetime. The realization hit him with brutal clarity. This was not obligation. This was not attachment. This was love, complete and terrifying in its depth. He had denied it because it made him vulnerable. Because it placed power in someone else's hands. Because it contradicted every rule he had lived by. Standing in that hospital corridor, he understood the truth he could no longer outrun. If Zara died, something essential in him would die with her. That night, exhaustion finally turned against him. His body demanded rest, his mind refused to allow. When he closed his eyes, the image returned. The knife. The impact. The sound of her breath leaving her body. It replayed without variation, relentless. By the fourth night, his perception fractured. He caught glimpses of Zara's face reflected in polished surfaces, in windows, in darkened screens. He heard her voice in background sounds, calling his name with quiet insistence. Each time he turned, only to find nothing. Enzo confronted him gently, urging rest. Dominic ignored him. "Nothing matters," Dominic said at last, his voice flat. "None of it." The words chilled the room. He summoned his lieutenants late that night. They gathered around him, tense, waiting. Dominic looked older, hollowed, eyes rimmed with red. "Everything outside that room," he said, gesturing toward Zara's door, "is ash. If it burns, let it burn. You protect her. You protect this hospital. Anyone who threatens that doesn't see another sunrise." No one argued. They understood the shift. This was not strategy. This was fixation. Devotion stripped of balance. As the city reeled from escalating violence, Dominic remained locked in place. He took calls without hearing them. He signed orders without reading details. His empire continued to move, but without its center. Zara stirred for the first time on the fifth day. A slight movement. A change in rhythm. Dominic was on his feet instantly, calling for nurses. She did not wake, but the movement was real. Progress, fragile and hard-won. Dominic returned to his chair, gripping her hand with careful pressure. His thumb brushed her skin, grounding himself in her presence. For the first time since the attack, he allowed himself to speak quietly, words meant only for her. "I don't care what happens to me," he said. "Just stay." Outside, Chicago carried on. Deals were made. Lines were crossed. Consequences unfolded. Inside that room, the most dangerous man in the city waited, reduced to hope and fear, tethered entirely to the woman who had changed him with a single act. Nothing would return to what it had been. Dominic knew this with certainty. Whatever remained of his life would now be shaped by the cost of loving her. Zara came back to herself in fragments. Pain arrived first, sharp and deep, spreading through her side and chest. Her throat felt dry. Her body felt heavy, unresponsive. When she tried to move, her breath caught, and a soft sound escaped her lips. A hand tightened around hers instantly. Her eyes opened slowly, struggling against the light. Shapes formed. A ceiling. Machines. Then a face she did not expect to see so close. Dominic sat beside the bed, bent forward, his grip firm but careful. His hair had grown unevenly along his jaw, dark stubble shadowing his face. His eyes were bloodshot, rimmed with exhaustion, fixed on her as if she might disappear if he blinked. He looked nothing like the man she knew from the club. "You're here," he said, voice rough, barely steady. "You're alive." Zara tried to speak. The effort sent a wave of pain through her, and she winced. Dominic leaned closer, one hand rising instinctively, stopping himself before touching her face. "Don't," he said quickly. Just stay awake." She swallowed, blinking at him. "How long?" she whispered. 5 days, he answered. "You scared the hell out of me." Her memory returned in pieces. The club. The movement in the crowd. The knife. She looked down, seeing bandages where her dress had been. Her breath hitched. Dominic noticed immediately. "It's over," he said. "You're safe. I swear to you." Silence stretched between them, broken only by the steady rhythm of the monitors. Dominic lowered his head, resting his forehead against the edge of the bed. His shoulders shook once before he forced himself still. "Why?" he asked quietly. "Why did you do it?" Zara stared at the ceiling, searching for something logical. Something that made sense. She found nothing that fit. What rose instead was a simple truth she had avoided naming. "I didn't think," she said. "I just knew I couldn't let you die." Dominic lifted his head, eyes locked on hers. She met his gaze, unflinching. "I love you," she continued, voice weak but certain. "I tried not to. I told myself it was wrong, that it wouldn't last. But when I saw that knife, none of that mattered. I couldn't picture a world where you weren't in it." His composure collapsed. Dominic pressed his face into the mattress beside her hand, breath breaking as emotion tore through him. He made no attempt to hide it. "I love you too," he said, the words barely holding together. "I didn't know how to say it without destroying everything." Zara squeezed his fingers with what strength she had left. In that moment, power, fear, and reputation meant nothing. There was only two people, stripped down to what they could no longer deny. Recovery did not arrive quickly, and it did not arrive gently. Zara's body resisted easy progress. Complications followed the surgery, forcing her to relearn movements she once took for granted. Walking required assistance at first. Breathing deeply came with sharp reminders of where the blade had entered. Pain management became a careful balance, monitored daily by specialists Dominic brought in without question. She was moved into a private recovery suite overlooking the city. Physical therapists arrived every morning. Doctors rotated through with charts and quiet instructions. Dominic attended every update, memorizing details, asking questions, never leaving space for oversight. When Zara slept, he sat nearby. When she woke, he was there, grounded and attentive, holding her hand during exercises that left her trembling with effort. 3 months into her recovery, Dominic arranged the transplant that saved her grandmother's life. The procedure took place at a leading medical center under strict anonymity. Zara learned about it only after the surgery was complete. When she confronted him, emotion tight in her chest, he answered simply. "She raised you," he said. That was enough. The changes in Dominic extended beyond what money could solve. He began seeing a therapist twice a week, sessions held in an office far removed from his usual spaces of control. At first, he spoke little. Silence had always been his shield. Over time, words followed. He spoke about his father's death in prison. about growing up measuring worth through fear, about the habits that kept him alive but left him hollow. He stepped back from daily operations, delegating decisions he once guarded obsessively. Meetings shortened. Orders slowed. For the first time, he allowed others to carry weight he had always claimed as his own. At night, he and Zara talked openly. He told her about the violence he had normalized, the lines he crossed without hesitation. He did not soften the truth. Zara listened without interrupting, without excusing, without turning away. "I don't want you to become someone else," she told him one evening. "I want you to become someone more." The words stayed with him. Healing for both of them demanded patience. Some days were marked by progress, others by frustration and exhaustion. Yet each step forward was shared. Zara learned to trust her body again. Dominic learned restraint, presence, and care without control. Their bond was no longer built on secrecy or proximity to danger. It was built on effort, accountability, and the quiet choice to keep moving forward together, even when the path refused to straighten. Change did not arrive through a single decision. It came through structure, patience, and risk. Dominic understood that no one simply walks away from a life like his. Clean exits belonged to stories told by people who had never stood where he stood. What was possible, however, was redirection. Over the course of a year, he began reshaping the organization from the inside. Daily control was handed to trusted lieutenants who understood the cost of mistakes. Roles were clarified. Operations that drew unnecessary attention were closed. Long-standing obligations were handled quietly, methodically, without the dominance Dominic once insisted on. He maintained enough connections to ensure stability and safety, but the center of power no longer rested in his hands. Some resisted the shift. Others adapted. Dominic accepted both outcomes without force. Authority, he learned, did not require constant presence. It required clarity. Throughout this process, his attention remained fixed on Zara. Security followed her movements, visible enough to reassure but distant enough to allow freedom. Her apartment was upgraded with surveillance she approved herself. Routes to work were monitored. Emergency protocols were in place long before she asked about them. Dominic also began funding hospital programs under layers of anonymity. Equipment appeared without names attached. Training grants materialized without publicity. Zara recognized the pattern immediately. "This is you trying to make amends," she said one evening. "It's me trying to give," he replied. The distinction mattered to her. For years, Dominic had taken control, taken territory, taken lives. Learning to give without expectation challenged instincts he had relied on to survive. He watched Zara carefully, measuring his actions against her comfort, adjusting when she pushed back. Protection, he learned, was not ownership. Zara held firm boundaries. She refused to shrink her life to fit his fear. She returned to work, reclaimed routines, insisted on independence. Dominic supported her, even when it unsettled him. Each time he stepped back instead of tightening his grip, he felt the weight of that choice. Each time, he made it again. Their relationship grew steadier, less defined by intensity and more by trust. Meals shared quietly. Long conversations that had nothing to do with danger. Plans that extended beyond survival. Dominic no longer measured his future by what he controlled. He measured it by what he preserved. Sacrifice had once meant loss to him. Pain. Consequence. Now it carried a different meaning. It meant restraint. It meant choosing restraint even when no one would question excess. The life they were building demanded that choice daily. Neither of them believed it would ever be easy. What mattered was that it was intentional, shaped not by fear or obligation, but by commitment to something better than what they had known. 2 years later, the rooftop garden above Dominic's Gold Coast penthouse sat quiet under the fading evening light. Zara stepped out from the stairwell still wearing her navy scrubs from Stroger Hospital's trauma unit. Her posture carried confidence now, movement steady, earned through long months of recovery and work she chose to return to. Dominic followed with 2 glasses of wine, his stride relaxed, his presence no longer weighted by constant vigilance. Her phone rang. She smiled when she saw the name. "Sunday," she said after the call ended. "She wants us there by 4. She said not to be late." Dominic nodded, a small smile breaking through. Her grandmother's acceptance had not come easily, but it had come honestly, measured by consistency rather than promises. That mattered more than words. They moved to the edge of the garden, the city stretching beneath them. The skyline glowed as the sun dipped low, familiar and changed all at once. Dominic set the glasses aside and wrapped his arms around Zara from behind, resting his chin near her temple. "I used to believe I'd destroy anything I loved," he said quietly. "I was ready to burn the world for you." She turned in his arms, meeting his eyes. "Now," he continued, "I'm trying to build something instead." They held each other without urgency, fully aware that danger had not vanished. Threats still existed. Consequences still followed old choices. This was not a fantasy built on denial. It was a future shaped by effort, restraint, and shared purpose. Zara leaned into him, secure in the knowledge that love had not erased who they were, but had demanded more of them. For anyone listening, this story leaves a few truths behind. Redemption is possible for those willing to face themselves honestly. Sacrifice reveals what matters most. Labels limit what people are allowed to become. Protection should never replace freedom. Healing takes time, patience, and commitment. Thank you for staying with this story. If it moved you, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss what comes next. Share where you're watching from and tell us which moment stayed with you. Another powerful story is coming tomorrow. We appreciate you for helping us bring these American stories to life.